Before we get started in today's video, be sure to enter our Act 2 giveaway for 10,000 Valorant points. You can find all of the details in the top comment and description below, and it ends on Sunday the 7th of March. Good luck! Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral and welcome to HitScan. You know what's coming? We're going to go over all of Astra's abilities, how they work, how much they cost, and just all of the myth busting and interactions that you'll need to know about Agent 15. Let's get straight into it. The first real thing to talk about is her Astral Form. You activate to enter the Astral Form where you place stars with primary fire. You actually press the X button, which is typically the ult, to get into this form, but we'll talk about the ultimate in a little bit. This effectively acts like an Omen map view for where you place down utility. For Omen, you place down smokes, and it pretty much works in the exact same way for Astra. You can go into Astral Form anytime you want. There's no cooldown on how many times you could jump into this, and you can stay in it infinitely if you really wanted. But the main thing is that you can place utility anywhere on the map from this position. A key thing to note is that even though you're traversing the map in this Astral Form, your main body doesn't travel anywhere. You can't use it to teleport around the map, for example. It's just more of a nice UI to see the map layout and where you can place stuff. This is what you look like when you're looking in your map. So if an enemy sees you like this, they can punish it, as you are not invulnerable when you're in the Astral Form. If an enemy comes along and shoots you, he will kill you, much like if you were in the Shadow Form, I suppose, for Omen when you're placing down smokes, or in something like an Aldron for Sova. The main weakness of this is that when you are in this Astral Form, you don't have any information on what's happening around you. The main area is that the audio gets muffled. So even for this example, you have an enemy just shooting this wall and you go into the Astral Form, you can see just how little information you have to work with. Also, when you're in the Astral Form, you can't see enemies on this minimap, you can't see any of the enemy's utility or your allies' utility, you can only see what you place down. But this is your main way of using utility. But be careful when you're in this form. All of the information of things going on around you is incredibly limited, so do it from a safe position. That's the Astral Form, but we need to talk about stars. And these are deployables that you can place down and then can reactivate later. And you can transform these into nova pulses, nebulas, or a gravity well, which we'll talk about shortly. The abilities in the menu don't actually cost any form of credits. You'll have them at the start of every round for free, and each of them have their own cooldowns. The thing that you need to actually buy in the menu at the start of a round are stars, which you can see on the left hand side, and these cost 200 credits each. You can hold 5 total, and all of this is visible on the top of the UI. Stars are the resource needed to place down your abilities and utility when you are in your Astral Form. If you don't have any stars, for example you didn't buy them or you used them all up, you won't be able to use any form of utility, other than your ultimate, which we'll get onto. And these stars can be made into any of the 3 normal abilities that Astra has available to her. Typically when the stars are placed down on the map, they cannot be picked up again. But when a star is played, it's visible to you, it's visible to your teammates, and also visible to the enemies. But they are not destroyable, and they will last infinitely until you use them, or the round ends and that resource is used up. Basically think of them like Cypher's cyber cages or Yoru's bait steps, that they are just placed there, and you can activate them whenever you want, and you can also activate them across the map. There's no range on them. All of the abilities, the smoke, the stun, and the vacuum, all have their own cooldowns. So you can actually use all 5 of your stars to be 5 smokes or 5 stuns, for example. But just bear in mind that you can't use 5 stuns at once, as there is a cooldown on how often you can use it. It's basically once every 12 to 15 seconds, but we'll get into the nitty-gritty details in a sec. Once a star is deployed from any of the various abilities, the resources you see on screen will be used up and you cannot use it again. And whilst these stars cost 200 credits when you're in the buy phase, you will automatically get 2 free stars at the start of each round, and they will be added on top of the stars that you might have left. So for example, you finish a round and you only have 1 star left in your UI. At the start of the next round, you will be automatically given 2 stars for free, but to get the final 2 to make it 5, you need to spend 200 credits on each of them. So the long short of it is, when you place down a star, that resource gets used up and you can turn that star into one or three things. But you need to be careful about when, how, and where you're placing this utility to get the most use out of it. However, if you do plant a star in the wrong position, there is a way around it that you can use to get it refunded, basically. And that ability is called Dissipate, where when you place down a star, you press the F button to dissipate it. It blooms as a fake nebula, which is the smokes, disappears, and you actually get a refund and a return star to you that you can then place in a new location after a short delay. When you place down the star and use Dissipate, the star blooms for about 2.5 seconds before it disappears, and you'll also see in the UI that you will be eventually refunded a temporary star. The refund usually takes about 8 seconds. You'll notice as well that the star that you are refunded is yellow, and that's because this is a temporary star. Much like some of the utility that Cypher and Killjoy has, when you pick it up and reuse it, you still won't be able to take it into the next round. You'll still have to buy a new one. Basically, how that applies to the likes of Cypher and Sky with her heal, it's effectively the same as that. You get a temporary star that you can use again in that round, but the next round it will be used up and you won't be able to use it again unless you buy another star from the buy menu. So you get the idea, you get a temporary star, you can use it again in that round for whatever you want, but if you decide to hold on to it, you go into round number 2, it will be used up. But this Dissipate ability is really good for scenarios where you are, say, defending and setting up all of your star utility on the A site as an example, but the enemy team executes on B. You can still pick up all of your old star utility and use it somewhere else again. It's also really good on the flip side where you might be attacking, you can bait a lot of star utility towards the B site, but immediately hit A, dissipate all of the utility that's over on B, and use it again a little bit later in the round. But seeing as we've spoken a lot about the Dissipate ability, let's talk about the real version of the Smoke's Nebula, where you transform a star into a Nebula Smoke, which looks like this. When you activate the star into a nebula, like we've been talking about, a resource will be used up and you won't get another. The smokes last about 15 seconds from start to finish, and they are pretty much identical to Omen smokes. Brimstones last a little bit longer, but you can see the size comparison between the two smokes here. Similar again to Omen smokes, Astra's nebulas are hollow in the center, kinda like me, and it means that you can flash on the inside of them, see clearly within the smoke, against enemies for example, and all of that typical jazz. When it comes to the myth-busting interactions, there's not really too much to go over with Astra as a whole. With her layout being kinda complex and kinda difficult to explain in some cases, her abilities and how they interact are incredibly easy to understand. The smokes, for example, work the same way as normal smokes. They don't stop bullets, they don't stop utility going into the center of them, and generally they behave the exact same way as Omen smokes to a T. Everything that you could do there, you can do now with Astra. Like I mentioned previously though, you can use all 5 of these stars in a round to just make them as Nebula Smokes, but you can't use all 5 of those star charges all at once. For smokes though, you do have 2 charges that you can use at any given time. But if you use one or both of those charges up in a second, the cooldown you'll have to wait is about 14 seconds before they come online again. So you can pop down 2 on an execute, use them instantly, but you will have to wait 14 seconds before another smoke becomes available. Also, you'll of course need the star resources, but hopefully none of that is too confusing. The only interesting interaction that we've seen is that you can put them on boxes, but narrow stuff like the walls on Ascent are a little bit too narrow to set them up on. I'll have to double check if that's the same as Omen, which is surprising considering I'm an Omen main. I should know this off the top of my head, but there are some stuff that the smoke doesn't work half as well on. But other than that, really straightforward, you'll get it. The next ability that I wanted to talk about is the Gravity Well, which is something a little bit more unique in Astra's kit. You activate a star to form a gravity well, where players in the area are pulled towards the center before it explodes, making all players still trapped inside fragile. This includes enemies, allies, and also yourself, so do be careful. You can see the general radius of the ability, and we can go over the general important stuff now. You only have 1 charge of this ability, but you can reuse it like we said before, with the cooldown being every 12 seconds. When activated, it will pull all players within that vicinity into the center of the vortex, and then 3 seconds later after the activation, it won't do any damage when it explodes, but it will make you fragile, the same as Killjoy's alarm bot for example. You can run out of the ability fairly easily, but it will slow you down to a walking speed if you're still running with your gun out. You can also use any form of utility to get out fairly easily. Jet dashes, Omen teleports. The hardest thing though is actually using stuff like blast packs or jumping. Because this is a gravitational pull, it pulls you right to the ground. So if you're trying to jump out of it or use any utility to blast yourself into the air, it's not going to work that well. It's incredibly hard to do, and it will most likely pull you down from small ledges like the hookah example we got in the trailer yesterday. It's not that significant, but it's certainly worth bearing in mind if say you are a race player. If you're trying to blast pack out of it, it's probably safer and easier to just run with your knife out in those cases. Just food for thought more than anything. Other than that though, it is pretty straightforward. It doesn't really stop you from doing much, but it does stop forms of utility. The likes of Boombots, Trailblazers, the Owl Drone, or even Sky Seekers will get trapped in the center of the vortex for a couple of seconds. The final ability to talk about is the Nova Pulse, where you activate a star yet again to become a Nova Pulse, where it charges briefly and then strikes, concussing all players within its area. After activating the pulse, it will light up, and if an enemy, ally, or yourself is still in that space when it crashes 1.5 seconds later, you will be stunned for about 4 seconds total. This stun will have the same characteristics as a breach stun, where your vision, movement is impaired, and also your firing speed will be reduced for that time too. This effect will also hit Owl Drones, Trailblazers, and all other controllable utility. That's pretty much it. Straightforward stuff, really. But now we get onto the ultimate, the Cosmic Divide. When your Cosmic Divide is charged up, you use the secondary fire in Astral Form to begin aiming it. You line it up like so, and then primary fire to select the 2 locations, and an infinite Cosmic Divide connects the 2 points that you select, and it blocks bullets and heavily dampens audio. The ultimate costs 7 ult charges. You're seeing how it gets placed down in the gameplay, and once the Cosmic Divide is placed, it takes about 3 seconds to properly wind up before the wall is properly placed down. The divide stays up and lasts for a total of 20 to 21 seconds, give or take. The divide completely denies vision on the other side for both teams, so they're all negatively affected by the vision taken away, and it also stops any bullets from traveling through like we spoke about, no matter if it's an enemy, an ally on your team, or yourself. You cannot fire your bullets through this divide at all. You can, however, this is the big question, throw abilities and utility through the divide. From mollies to smokes to recon abilities to ultimates, we'll go over some individual examples, but all of it pretty much fires through no problem. But here are some other interesting reactions that we wanted to talk about before we end this video. First of all, no wall utility works on the divide itself. For example, you can't breach flash or aftershock on the actual divide, but you can fire your utility through it, like I'm showing you with the example on screen. For Cypher, your camera can tag enemies through the divide if you get lucky or roughly know where they're going to be standing, and it will also show their position on the other side of the wall. Of course, you can't fire or do damage there, but it's pretty good information to know roughly where they're going to go if you decided to peek it. Also, if you neural theft, you use your ultimate, it will ping and show the player's position through the divide. For Killjoy, we might have actually found a bug. If you're in Astral Form when you get detained by the Killjoy's lockdown, you can still place and activate stars whilst detained in Astral Form, but once you press X again, come out of the Astral Form, you will be detained and not able to do anything. So Riot, I don't think that's intentional, might be worth a look in, but other than that, it's fairly standard stuff. For Omen, an enemy can still teleport through the wall, the paranoia still travels through normally. Basically everything for Omen works as it should do even if the wall wasn't there. All of Phoenix's utility flows through the wall as intended, but one interaction that we spotted that was quite odd is apparently if he's hit with the invulnerability of the gravity well whilst he's ulting, when he returns to his old self, he will still have the effect on him. It won't be cleansed if he dies in his ult, which is a little bit odd. I'm not too sure if that's the same for Killjoy's alarm bot, but again, might be an inconsistency and a little bit of a bug. The Sage Wall can be placed through the ultimate, as can her slows. Yoru can fire all of his stuff through as well. The Viper can place her wall down, her smoke, and even her Viper's Pit ultimate will travel through the divide as if it wasn't there. But like I mentioned, when it comes to the actual utility and how it interacts with some of the other stuff in the game, it really isn't that complex. Yoru had a lot more going for him with all of the how does his teleport work with X, Y, and Z. For Astra, it's pretty self-explanatory for the most part. The main thing to get your head around is how all of her utility works and how it goes in any given round. Maybe we'll have some gameplay later on this week, but we still have a lot of other content coming out in regards to the next patch and the next act. So keep an eye out over the next couple of days. Be sure to enter that giveaway and subscribe and all that jazz, which you can find all of the details down in the description. Thanks for watching. If you have any more questions, let us know in the comments below. We'll be sure to answer them soon. Take care. We'll see you then.